My name is Glenn Mills. I'm the Director of Communications for the Utah Department of Corrections. We have with us our media witnesses as well. They are Jim Spiewak with KUTV, Sarah Murphy, ABC4, Ben Winslow, Fox 13, Jessica Miller with the Salt Lake Tribune, Kyle Dunphy with Utah News Dispatch, Hannah Schoenbaum with the Associated Press, and Pat Reevy with KSL.com. Also from the Department of Corrections, I have on my right Brian Redd. He is the Executive Director. I have Bart Mortensen, who is the Warden of the Utah State Correctional Facility, and Chief Randall Honie with the Division of Prison Operations. So this press conference will go like this. I will give a brief rundown of the events that took place since we talked last. We will then turn it over to the media witnesses. Ben Winslow will act as chair of the panel. He will make a statement, and then you will be free to ask the other witnesses any questions that you would like. After that, we will hear from Executive Director Redd, and then Warden Mortensen, and then we will take any questions you have following that. At 12:25 a.m., Taberon Dave Honie was pronounced dead. Prior to that, here is what took place. At 12:03, he gave his final statement. Working together with the media witnesses, we put this statement together as this. From the start, it's been, if it needs to be done for them to heal, let's do this. If they tell you you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters here, continue to change. I love you all. Take care. At 12:04 a.m., lethal injection begins. At 12:13 a.m., a second dose is delivered. At 12:21, the EKG shows a flat line. A sheet is placed over the condemned's head at that point, and then he is pronounced dead at 12:25. We will now hear from Ben Winslow of Fox 13.
So what we observed as we were in the room is when the curtain was drawn, Taberon Honie appeared to be looking up, lifting his head up, laid down. His arms were strapped to the table. He had IVs in both of his arms. The warden read the death warrant to him, and he did then give his final words. His foot appeared to be twitching. We couldn't tell if it was out of nervousness or whether it was just a reaction that was happening. He did continue to look around. He closed his eyes. His foot continued to tap and then stopped. He continued to look around from what we observed. He appeared to be mouthing something to the warden and the director of operations. We could not hear that, whatever it was he said. He lifted his head up again, took a deep exhaling breath, and opened his mouth wide. His breathing appeared to be a little rapid, but it then slowed down very quickly. And then his skin turned pale, turned blue, and we observed the EKG being tested, to measure his pulse again and again and again and again. And as you heard, that was when, shortly afterward, that was when he was pronounced dead and the curtain was drawn for us.
Ben's kind of speaking on behalf of everyone here for us. He's kind of our spokesperson. So yeah, I guess questions.
Do all of you have any questions of the media?
Can you tell us what it was like, seeing that with your own eyes? What's going through your head right now?
I mean, for me, it was, I said this going in, my hope was that I would watch someone fall asleep and just not wake up. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. It wasn't traumatic in terms of there's, nothing gory or gruesome about the actual procedure. As Ben mentioned, there was a little bit of a leg twitch early on. I noticed and there was no clocks in there. So our sense of time may be a little off, but it seemed like for me, maybe after the first couple minutes, 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, I didn't see his chest moving. I noticed it right at the beginning. You could see his chest moving, you could see him breathing, and then that kind of stopped. And so, again, the feeling for me was, when is he actually going to die? Didn't know that. And we were watching for about 15-ish or so minutes. But again, his eyes were closed for most of it, or almost all of it, after the first dose was delivered. And for me, it was someone went to sleep and didn't wake up.
Jim, what was it like to sit down in the chair before the curtain was even pulled? What was going through your mind at that point?
Again, just hopefully I watched someone fall asleep and not wake up, and it's nothing more than that.
Was there a sense of nerves or anything?
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
there nerves
I
in
could
the
feel a little
room?
tension. I could feel a little tension. You know, there was really no talking going on amongst anyone in the room, in the witness room. It was very, very quiet. And I think we all kind of realized the gravity of the situation of what was about to happen. And I, quite honestly started to feel a little bit of nervousness, anxious nervousness, not knowing what to expect.
Question for Pat. Pat, you were present at the firing squad execution of Ronnie Lee Gardner, and now you're present for Taberon Honie's execution. Kind of talk about some of the similarities as you witnessed both of those executions, maybe some differences, just, kind of describe.
I don't think there was much similarity at all. I agree that this was far less traumatic. The firing squad execution I thought was much more violent. It's very shake shoot, just so loud. And this was really like watching a person fall asleep and not wake up again. So it was a much more, I guess if there's a peaceful way to put someone to death, that's what this was. It took much longer, but as it was mentioned, after like the first minute, it was just watching him, and they kept checking the EKG machine, make sure, see if he still has a pulse. But the firing squad one was much more violent. It was faster, but this was not the same at all.
Kind of describe the emotions you felt before and after each execution. I mean, this being not your first, was this maybe a little easier to process?
For me, it's a hard question to answer, just because I guess I kind of knew what I was getting into before. You're still, the gravity of the situation. You're watching a person die. That's not lost on you. But again, we're there as witnesses for the media, for watchdogs, watching over, make sure things are carried out correctly. And I think you're in kind of work mode. You're not focusing on, oh no, I'm watching a person die. You're focusing on your deadlines, making sure you accurately report everything, and that you're watching everything. It goes off smoothly, I guess.
What were the people carrying out the execution wearing? Did they have ski masks on to hide identity?
Couldn't see him.
Okay.
Yeah, the IV lines went through the wall. We couldn't see.
Just as it's extremely quiet and still in this room when no one's talking, is that what it sounded like for you? Was it just as quiet?
Yeah, that's one of the first things I noticed. And speaking with Ben previously, he mentioned that about the last execution he witnessed is we got in the witness room and none of us spoke until after it was over. I want to echo what Jim said about timing. You really have no sense of time in there. It could have been minutes. It could have been much longer. When we found out it was about 17 minutes, I thought it was longer. We sat in the witness room just in silence for a while until they opened the curtains, and we saw Mr. Honie strapped on the gurney. And I want to mention one thing we discussed is it appeared he had a fairly calm and collected demeanor as he was laying there. But yeah, it was fairly quiet throughout until after it was over.
What was the first word said after the silence in the room? Was it a reactionary?
I
I think it's
Or-
mostly comparing notes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, we compared our notes for his last
The
words.
final words.
Okay.
Ensuring accuracy.
Mhm.
And we heard the words that he said. What would you say about the tone or how he delivered it? What was,
I would say that it was calm and just
Oh,
very,
it's very clear.
Very clear.
It was easy to understand him, and
Were you all aware of the timing of the second dose? And did you notice any physical reaction?
this is the first we've
No.
heard of it right now.
we could not, just from our vantage point and observations and being unable to know exactly the nature of the operations that were going on, we could not know when that would be administered.
Mhm.
There was no physical reaction that we observed that would indicate a second dose.
The main physical changes we noticed, is previously been mentioned, was he had the white sheet pulled up slightly above his stomach, below his chest, and you could see that rise and fall with every breath. And at some point, that eventually stopped. And his right foot that was bouncing, that slowed and stopped as well at some point.
I did write down in my notes, just saw fluid moving through one tube, thought maybe about roughly 10 plus minutes in. Wasn't sure if it was saline. I heard them say earlier, maybe saline might be going through. So I did write that down in my notes, but at the time I didn't know if that was another dose or what. But there was no movement from him when that second dose, or if that was the second dose when it went through, there was no movement. No movement at all.
Just down on this end, what stood out to you most, or maybe was most surprising about what you witnessed?
I mean, the whole experience was sort of surreal. I mean, just watching. I guess it's. I guess I kind of expected something more dramatic to happen, and I think that's sort of the absence of that was what stuck out to me. It was a pretty intense situation, but I'd say just sort of overall, just somewhat bizarre and seemed like it went pretty seamless.
It seemed seamless, but it seemed like, again, we lost track of time. It really seemed like a long time. I also saw the previous lethal injection execution, and I didn't remember it taking that long. And that's not to say one way is better than the other. It's just that it really seemed like it took a very long time for this to happen.
Questions really for anybody. All of you didn't know how long this took place, didn't know there was a second dose administered until right now. Do you feel like that should be part of the process where you should know key points as they're going on as a witness? Or do you feel like it should be a complete blank slate, having just done this? Would that help you through the process?
I think
Would you like to have the comms in your ear that says pushing a dose, for example, pushing a second dose?
I think the one thing that we all discussed that would be really helpful is having a clock
Yeah.
in our visibility. But otherwise, everything was pretty well communicated, and having people in the room with us to answer immediate questions certainly in the process was smoothly for all of us. And I think just knowing that we all were there and able to compare what we saw with each other was helpful.
Just a show of hands, how many have witnessed more than one execution in Utah? 2. And then for all of you, would any of you be willing to do this again?
How long did it take for you guys to piece together his final words? So that you guys kind of worked together to piece out? How long did that take?
Well, we were all taking notes, individual notes about what was said. And so it was just more comparing what we heard to ensure that it was accurate. So
As far as the time, less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. just,
Did you find that tedious?
Mm.
I mean, only to give some context to my question, it seems like a person's last words is something that you want to make sure that you get right. That's
Yes.
one of the things that we very much do. It seems, would it have been helpful to kind of go over your question
to have that recorded to ensure the accuracy so that you guys aren't scribbling down to take notes, trying to verify it afterwards, or did the process seem to be just fine?
I personally felt like between the 7, including Glenn, 8 of us, it was simple enough. Some of us got the beginning, some of us got the middle, some of us got the end. And I also feel like that's part of the reason we're there, is for us to be the ones to listen and write down and listen to that tone of voice. So I felt like between the 7 of us, it was fairly simple.
I mean, would I like a recording to ensure accuracy? Absolutely, but I work with what I have, and this is the circumstances we're placed under. And so we do the best that we can.
And he spoke fast.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke very fast. So we were all jotting down quickly.
Any other questions? All right, we appreciate all of you.
May we ask questions of the?
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
We'll have a few statements and then we will turn it over to questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would probably go ahead and go out.
Thank you.
Yes. Mhm. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead. Once. Okay, once again, we will first hear from Executive Director Brian Redd. He will have a statement. Following Executive Director Redd, we will hear from Warden Bart Mortensen. And then Ben mentioned how in the witness room we saw Mr. Honie mouth some words and lift up and look, and Chief Honie will explain what that was all about.
So today our department fulfilled one of the most consequential responsibilities given to the Department of Corrections. No one involved today, takes joy in carrying out this responsibility, but we recognize it as one of our statutory duties and we take it seriously. Preparation for this situation started months ago, and it required hours and hours of work. You may already be aware of this, but around 200 individuals were involved in this tonight. Just in this situation, that doesn't include all of the additional staff that were required to keep the normal prison operations maintained. We want to thank our partners, our allied agencies, including the Department of Public Safety and the Salt Lake City Police Department for their help, and there were others. We thank them for their support. Our team worked through this process and the complexities in a very conscientious and dedicated manner. This is a significant event, and I watched our staff fulfill these responsibilities in a respectful, professional, and dignified manner, and I thank them for that. They did an amazing job. We are providing support to our staff, including mental health support or whatever they need for those that were involved or any of our staff members that may need it. We want to thank all of you for being here and covering this today, and appreciate all that you've done in bringing the transparency and accountability for this event. Thank you.
Thank you. To provide a brief rundown of facility operations throughout today and the next few days, at 6 a.m. this morning, the facility was on lockdown with the exception of a few incarcerated individual workers. With the workers, they provided hot meals and provided hot breakfast and hot lunch, and then we provided a a cold dinner for the evening. Throughout the day, all essential medical and legal services took place. And also, yesterday, I guess, the facility continued intakes of newly incarcerated individuals. We wanted to avoid disrupting the schedules of our allied agencies. At about 4 p.m. yesterday afternoon, we asked all staff who weren't providing an essential function to either the execution or the facility ops to end their workday and go home. And by 6:30 p.m., the only staff left on the facility were those that were on the master pass list. We expect by 6 a.m. this morning, the facility will resume normal operations. And over the upcoming days, we've collaborated with our clinical health services partners to provide mental health services for the incarcerated individuals. And we've also collaborated closely with our release and reentry division to increase case management exposure to the inmates so that they can help where needed. Thank you.
I'll speak to Mr. Winslow's question about Mr. Honie mouthing something. So he was actually speaking to the warden and myself, and he simply stated, "Thank you for taking care of my family." And then he raised up his head and looked over to where his family was viewing and just said, "I love you."
It was also reported from the family's witness room that his mother also said, "I love you, son," back.
Can I ask, what was the decision to issue a second dose of pentobarbital? Was that a decision made on the fly as a result of him? Was there an issue, or was this always planned?
It was made ahead of time at the doctor's recommendation. Initially, the plan was to push a second dose at 20 minutes. Because the second dose was prepared and could not be used again, the doctor made the recommendation just to move that up to 5 minutes.
Was that because he wasn't responding to it?
No, it appeared that he was responding fine. It was just because the doctor recommended it and the dose was already basically used, and so he just moved it up.
Can you discuss now the ceremony that happened after you pronounced that?
Do you have information on that?
So Mr. Honie's father and his cousin just wanted to come in. According to their beliefs, the soul after the death can potentially get trapped where it place of death. And so they performed their ceremony to release the soul so he could return back to the mesa. It simply just involved a few feathers, bird feathers, and some cornmeal, and laying a path for the soul to leave the room. It was very quick, very simple.
And you said that afterwards, possibly you would say who the victim's family witnessed.
Yeah. Karen, can you send me that document? I'll work on that. And then if you have any other questions, we'll answer those.
I noticed, if I counted correctly, you checked the EKG, it looked about 5 times. Is that the average? Is that normal to check it that many times?
So the EKG machine we used, the screen times out after 3 minutes. It's still running. It was Bluetooth back to the medical doctor behind the wall. So it was constantly running. I was just turning the screen back on to ensure that no leads had fallen off and it was still running properly.
From the outside, it seems like everything went pretty smoothly. Was there anything that you noticed internally that may have slowed the process somewhere or involved some different movement than you had planned for this whole process?
No, we've been planning this for a long time. It took many different people working on many different parts, and it went according to plan, and we're grateful for that.
I will say, however, we still will have internal debriefings to go over everything and check everything to make sure everything went the way it should have and could have. Back to the witnesses, which ones were you asking about? So we had, for the victim witnesses, There were 7.
Not all showed up, but I don't know who's missing. I don't know which name.
Okay, I'm just going to give you the names of those that were expected. Trevia Wall, Betsy China, Sarah China, Benita Racheta, that's with a Y, Yaracheta, Isaac Racheta, Dakota Rogers, and Tony Rogers. Any other witnesses you're interested in? Sure. So for the condemned, we had Franklin Honie Sr. How do you pronounce the mom's name, Becky? Teresita Honie, Sherwin Leslie, Teresa Honie, and then Therese Day. We know the media witnesses. For government, we had Senator Darren Owens, Senator Mike Kennedy, House Speaker Mike Schultz, Scott Burns, Iron County District Attorney, Chad Dotson, Iron County Attorney, Sheriff Ken Carpenter, Iron County, Chief Darren Adams, Cedar City Police, Justin Anderson, who is the Utah Attorney General representative for our office, and John Pierpont, the governor's chief of staff, and Representative Casey Snyder.
Can I make one correction? Scott Burns is the Paiute County attorney, but was the original prosecutor on the case.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. Is it possible that the witnesses for the condemned and for the victim cross paths, or do you guys the procedures to make sure that they are separate?
Yes, we took procedures and plans so they would never cross paths. They were temporarily placed in a holding area and then driven to the chamber separately, and then they never cross paths.
Can you say, there's this discussion in the media room, his right foot kept
Yes.
in the air. To you, is that just nervousness, or do you have like music going on in his head? Or?
No, to me it was nerves. He was nervous going in there. I mean, rightfully so, and to me it appeared to be nerves the whole time.
Can you talk a little bit about the processing of certain lines? Was there any trouble finding a vein? Approximately how long did that take? Were you suffering pain during that process?
It went very smoothly. One poke in each arm, they were able to find a vein right away. He actually said it was painless for him, and IV team did a great job.
And he was compliant, getting onto the table and everything like that?
100% compliant, no issues.
Legs actually strapped?
Yes, sir. His legs were strapped at the ankles and right below the knees, and then on the thighs as well.
Could you speak on his morale? The last we heard from you at 10:30, between then and the time he was on the gurney, his final energy, what was he like?
He was very calm. It appeared, I don't know if you would say ready, but he appeared to have accepted it. He was just more or less, having thoughts to himself and just kind of gathering all that. He was quiet, didn't talk a lot. But
And did he listen to music that entire time up until you took him?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he walk into there on his own power?
Yes, sir. Yes, he walked in on his own power and was able to get up on the table on his own and was, again, compliant.
Did he say anything prior to the final prepared or statement that was actually shared with us?
He asked which room his family was in. He asked that he wanted to know so he could, I assume, say, "I love you." And then he also asked if he could have his glasses on so he could visually see. And so we granted that request to have his glasses on so he could do that.
Since historically there have been issues during the part of the process where the IV is being inserted, should the Department of Corrections look into amending the policy to where that is transparent for witnesses as well? Because
that happened it's my understanding that happened out of the view of witnesses. In reading up on botched executions, we know that sometimes there are issues with that process. And so I'm curious as to why that happened before witnesses were able to view.
Part of the reason, and we could always explore something in the future, but part of the reason is just so that the witnesses, particularly maybe his family, doesn't have to see all of that activity occurring and causing that type of traumatic experience.
And I'll just say in addition to that, we are bound by law to protect the identity of the IV team. So that's an important part of that as well.
The media witnesses were asked how we felt watching a person die. Obviously, it's part of our job to be a witness. Would you be willing to share how you feel after this event? I know you mentioned that this is a heavy event. It is part of your duty, part of your job. Would any of you be willing to share how you're feeling right now?
Well, a lot of it is we need to, check our feelings at the door. This is a responsibility that we have as a Department of Corrections. We know when we come into these roles that this is something we may have to do. Obviously, human life is important to all of us, and so it's impactful. But we try to check those things at the door and do our responsibility professionally so that it can be done, as well as possible.
Any other questions?
What important thing should we know, like what happens from here? I know Mr. Honie's body's with the medical examiner, I assume, just kind of talk about is there anything else we should know what happens next?
So as far as that's concerned, I would have to refer you to the ME if you want information on that.
I can make one comment. Okay. In the next day or so, we will be doing a debrief as a department. While this went off very smoothly, there's always things that we can learn and try to improve on, I'm sure. So we'll be doing that as a department. We'll be checking on our team members who were involved or anyone in our staff to make sure that they're good, that they have the support that they need. We will also have to report back to the court as it's required to do so. And so we're reporting back to the court as well. So those are a few more things that we'll be doing.
Glenn, you mentioned that clearly there's been a lot of research into using pentobarbital. Compared to your research, did everything go as planned as far as timelines? Was this the length you were expecting things to take?
Yes, it is. We went into it, as you heard from us earlier, very confident in the planning, the meticulous planning that we went through in this. And we would say, as a result of what happened, that showed tonight. All right. We really appreciate all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always free to contact me with anything you want to follow up on.